The regional study in regards to the financial reporting relating to sustainability in the public sector of Latin America. And for that, we will be listening Lourdes Felicidad Sánchez Álvarez, expert senior in financial management of the Inter-American Development Bank, and she will be the moderator of this session. Good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for your attention. And now we will talk about a very interesting point, something that has come from the FOCAL events, and therefore we are very happy to be here with you. Yesterday we talked about blockchain, technology, and different disruptive elements. Something that we never left was data. In that sense, we are going to talk about data and about very specific data. In the last months, in the last years, international investors have been very focused in seeing how the portfolios behave in relation to the environmental risks, the social and governance risks. FOCAL has not been indifferent to this and has reacted in a timely manner. When the declarations were written as a draft by IPSASB in June of this year, in August, FOCAL received the support of EY, IPSASB with the sustainability reporting. The progress of the statements of the sustainability and climate change and how it is impacted in the public sector without disregarding the private sector is of high relevance. And now I will introduce the speakers. It's worth to wait a little bit. Okay. The bias of the two speakers are very important. Hold on a minute, please. Perfecto. We will be listening to Müller-Marqués Berger, auditor, global leader for public sector, with Ernst & Young, with more than 15 years of experience in IPSASB. He is the chairman of the Consultative Advising Committee of IPSASB after 10 years of being the chairman of the public sector of Accountancy Europe, and that was used to known as the European Accounting Association. Thomas is now part of the task force of the European and Eurostat Standard Association for the public sector EPSAS. He is also a member of the Technical Advising Committee of Pulsar Committee of the World Bank, and he is also an advisor of the European Union and of the Committee of the Public Sector of the Institute of Auditors in Germany and of the Double. In Camila Sánchez, she is a senior manager and she provides advising in financial committee FAST for Ernst & Young in Germany. She is the leader to implement Accounting International Standard in the public sector, the IPSASB, and also Europe and Latin America. And before that, she was the head of the Department of Accounting Standards and Continuous Improvement of the Accounting Department of the Ministry of Finance and Economy in Panama. She is an economist and she has a bachelor's degree of business administration from Panama University. She has a master's degree from the Valle de Mexico University and a PhD of economy from Friedrich Schiller University. From Germany. Thank you. Good morning once again. I hope that yesterday you have had a wonderful afternoon and that you were able to listen the preliminary result of the sustainable study that we carried out in the last weeks. As it was presented, I want to thank very much all of you that have participated and contributed in this study, and the IDB, and all who have shared their comments with us. With your support, we were able to present the preliminary results, and I will also present them today. We have also distributed the summaries of the preliminary results written in Spanish, so I think you will have a copy of that version of the results in your table. Please take it, and if you don't have it, please let us know. Having said this, I will tell you the following. The preliminary results of this study. We think that it will be better to broken it in a couple of topics and priority areas. First, in order to prepare the study, what was the objective and what we did? Second, I want to talk about the results by topic in the questionnaires that we call dimensions. And before going to talk about benefits of sustainable results and financial data. And then I will cover the challenges. And then we ask you, which challenges do you see by capturing data and sustainable reports and the relation with financial information? And the last is the role of accountants and senior accountants. I think that all of us are these, but we need to understand our future role in the sustainable reporting. And last but not least important, conclusions and recommendations that I have given the participants. I am very pleased to share them with you and with IPSASB because it has high value and understand them is relevant for the guidelines of IPSASB. Background. I have to tell you that I'm a little bit angry by seeing all these lights because I lose the focus. But I think that you can see the slide. First, what is the objective of the study? Well, we want to have a general vision of the current status of the financial information in relation to sustainability in the public sector. We want to understand what are you doing in order to start developing this guideline in this region. So, what did we do? We developed a questionnaire, customized questionnaires, and we included 33 questions in order to get information on the 4 dimensions or priority areas. First are the sustainable reports. What are you doing in relation to these reports? Second, what are you doing in relation to the statements of wavering decisions in sustainable financial reporting? And also, what are you doing in the private sector and industrial sector? Because we also need to have there the wavering statements, because the WAC 4, they are relevant points. And the last point, what is the implementation of the recommended practices guidelines of IPSASB, the 1 and 3rd in special? And also IPSASB needs to develop more guidelines in the IPSGs and see the relationship with the current use. Well, before these questionnaires, we had 3 interviews structured with general accountants in 3 countries. And who participated in this study? Well, you see the following countries and who were interviewed for the survey. We interviewed the Brazil, Colombia, and Paraguay general accountants. And now I need to tell you the results by dimensions. First, the results of sustainable reporting. Before talking about sustainable data that have to be included, we focus first on the structural activities included in the national plans. We cannot report if we do not have a structure plan. And the result was that 8 of the 12 countries, 86% of the countries interviewed, adopted a national plan for sustainability and climate change. And the rest of the countries, 40%, have covered partially sustainable areas. Those who answered recognize the relevance of the national plans of development in order to go on progressing in the achievement of SDGs that were mentioned here: Bolivia, Ecuador, Mexico, Panama, and Costa Rica. We have a certain example of these national plans that I mentioned in this slide, as you can see at the bottom of the slide. In the following interesting question was, who was assigned as responsible for sustainable activities and national plans related? 86 or 4 of each interviewed country said that they assigned a responsible group for the implementation of the national plan against the climate change and sustainability. And on the left, you can see the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations and that we need to achieve.
At the right, you see the types of entities that were appointed to deal with the climate change and sustainability and all the risks correlated to climate change. And after the third point, we asked in the reports about the sustainability. We asked about the details. 93% of the reported countries or surveyed countries explained the SDG achievements and the progress with reports of voluntary countries to create the sustainability reports to achieve the SDGs. Only 14 out of these economies said that they used national guidance instruments to achieve this. And it's valuable for us to mention that these 14 countries have gone through a major effort trying to develop these reports. They've constituted matrix of data to create the reports of sustainability. And the last slide, in correlation to the sustainability reports, proves that 57% of the countries indicated that the financial reports are available from their side, and they could be used to create the financial reports, as I've said, in correlation to climate change. And part of this also links to the national budget, to the SDGs achievement. And we discussed the budget expenditure for the future to continue achieving the SDGs. The reports are correlated to expenditure to make it all sustainability. We have specific reports to achieve SDGs. There's many instruments that have been signed off by member economies who are responsible of creating these reports. And that responsibility is continuous. What we can achieve, or what we can see right here in this can be seen in the report, as well as the debts. You see how debt is created and how we're working to fight climate change. Now, in the second field, or in the second dimension, you have the disclaimers of financial reports, or the revelations of financial information in the reports of sustainability. The surveyed countries submitted information of financial nature, which led us to identify, discuss, and tackle the risks. 6 out of the surveyed countries indicated that they had constituted systems to measure the progress correlated to sustainability. However, and I'll continue discussing this, and we'll see what happens in the future, we recommended adjusting the systems to find ways to have information flow constantly for sustainability reports. There's other examples of reports created in the system. we see how we apply what we've obtained in Mexico. There's a National Statistics Agency, and we see the systems and how they've been used. There's traceability systems, control systems, or transparency systems in Costa Rica, and data from Panama has obtained, measuring the climate changes that we've observed. There's other climate indicators or environmental indicators used in Mexico. Which are the related manifestations of the generation of reports? Dave said that according to the consultation instrument was kicked off, and the countries have been working with IPSASB, drafting the initial phases of the report. As I've said, 14 countries were surveyed. They identified the risks correlated to climate change and opportunities. Others, for example, in Panama, the Ministry of Environment detected and created a plan to tackle climate change, to make it feasible for us to allocate budget in our projects, to clearly identify specific areas to mitigate climate change and implement other criteria. And that's an example. These countries have developed the initial instruments to deal with climate change. What's in the RPGs? We know that IPSASB used specific time and budget to develop instruments which are practical guidance or guidelines for sustainability in long term. The reports have to meet specific criteria. So 57 countries that were surveyed specified that they have information to score their services and to measure the impact in long term. But there's specific reasons that lead us to prepare the directive instruments that are created by IPSASB. Many countries specified that the information was of great importance for all the public. It's a long-term initiative, and that's the clear focus that we have in RPG. As a summary, we could say that the economies that participated in the study implemented the guidelines of IPSASB, and some countries said that they weren't adopted in their economies to be implemented in their nature of compulsory, being it compulsory as a norms state. We know what priorities are versus, we compare this with the RPGs, which are not mandatory. We're going to speak about the creation of these financial reports of sustainability and the benefits. There's 5 benefits. The first is the fact that it contributes to strengthening the decision-making process in correlation to the formulation of public policies and risk management. Second, it enables us to formulate public policies for the future, and we can also manage risks better with these sustainability reports. The second point, it anticipates governments, or it alerts governments and states about what they need in the future. It's like a warning instrument, and we know who needs to participate. It enables the assessment of the mandates, and we evaluate the public debt and additional resources that are generated for the community. That's the other strong point or benefit of the policies. For it makes us visualize the impacts and understand the activities that different agencies have to achieve our SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals. It enables us to correct, modify, and correct. There's risks associated with the facts, that are generated by climate change. We have specific horizons that lead us to that future. We need to work on drafting key elements to continue working to achieve the SDGs and to get funds allocated and to correctly exercise the expenditure for the future. We spoke about the benefits, but what about the challenges in regards to implementation of the sustainability reports? Well, what we found in the challenges or 5. The first challenge, obviously, in the region, and we spoke about this yesterday, we spoke about the great progress that we've obtained when implementing the norms or the financial report guidelines. And obviously, these reforms in parallel serve as accountants because they're also thought of as a challenge. The laws need to be implemented in parallel in its dimensions. We need to understand how these sustainability reports will lead us to some amendments. It's overwhelming a bit. The sustainability reports are a very important instrument for all governments that impacts all sectors. We must coordinate our efforts with other government agencies in charge of drafting environmental policies. We see all the entities or agencies working in this field. We coordinate our efforts, and we know that there's many stakeholders involved, and it makes it cumbersome for us to capture information to draft the sustainability reports. And it's not been an easy task, as you know. Third point, the challenge is the work overload here. And now we've discussed that there's overloads when we speak about creating financial reports based on initiatives that are needed to improve. We have another dimension to talk about for the non-financial reports. There's 2 other reports that reside along with the sustainability reports. So there's 3 instruments, and that will enhance the information. At points, the instruments used could not have that impact, but it needs to be used by the stakeholders that have an interest. It contains a lot of information. Another challenge was the international comparison between countries. We know that different countries have developed different methodologies now to create those indicators. There's no global methodology, and there's specific metrics to create the reports. Many economies have developed individually their methodologies and metrics. Different economies have developed their systems, to monitor their progress to achieve the SDGs. And it's a challenge. We know that it all affects. We have to compare what's happening with the information at an international scale and other scales, because another point that's not less important, the next challenge is important for all of us accountants too who work in the sector. In the report, we identify the agencies responsible to create these reports. Identifying these agencies leads us to also establish the roles of accountants and other roles that are appointed. In the second phase of my presentation, I'll explain the role that accountants play. And based on what we've heard from previous speakers, we think about the data of the study. We ask the participants in a study what they thought about the role of accountants and how they contribute to create the sustainability reports. They weren't surprised about defining the role of accountants, but they have no clarity. The majority of interviewees knew that it's not clear, but once they know what type of information they need to create for the financial reports, it's going to be better, and how it should be of public domain. We haven't clarified that just yet. And it's difficult to define the role of an accountant, but we'll branch out our understanding of the role into 2. First, we need to define the systems that we need and the information that we need to explain in the financial reports. There might be information that's not of financial nature, but of climate nature. Yesterday we spoke about blockchain, its benefits and challenges, and what we should include in the reports. The second point, we must have the users of the system understand their ownership. The accounting entries have to be stored correctly in the accounting system. So for accountants to continue the role and the roles, duties, and compile the data and improve the financial reports, the roles of accountants The interviewee said that the role of the accountant will vary depending on the information that they receive. Second point, the role would expand the scope if they can work on adapting the information. So the role of an accountant could be limited depending on the outputs or results of the sustainability reports. We need to have the impact. We spoke about it. We acknowledge who is responsible in his or her role and the vulnerabilities and the risks in correlation to climate change. I'll explain the conclusions of my presentation now. Well, if the clicker allows me to. No, it's not functioning. The clicker is not functioning. Can somebody change the slide, please? Well, okay. The conclusions and the recommendations are in this slide. First, the survey that was rolled out to the economies that were part of it experienced the impacts during the implementation of the initiative that leads us to create the sustainability reports. That's Road 1. It will facilitate the implementation of international standards in the public sector. On the other hand, we didn't start this from zero. It's very important. There's specific processes and steps in the process that we're getting prepared to achieve. There's reports with the specific chapters, and as part of the consultation process, we obtain information about climate change. The interview specified that climate change is important for all of us to achieve the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goal. There's many frames of reference, and the report is one. We spoke about GIR reports and others. We are lacking clarity about the methodologies and international guidance. We need to use these instruments, or else we're going to create problems when trying to report sustainability. We need to understand that it's a calling for all of you, and we know that IPSASB is still the leading agency to draft these reports. Now, we have the conclusions and recommendations for the implementation of international laws and methods, and this enhances the other instruments of IPSAS. If we have experience in the implementation of norms, it's all there, and it can be functional. That instrument contains lessons learned throughout the different phases as well as the phase of implementation. If I focus on recommendations, there's two types of recommendations. Number one, in correlation to the drafting of laws and financial report creation. Second point, there's information and implementation specifics of the norm. At the initial stages of the creation of the norms, we have 4 sub-recommendations in correlation to that stage. We in IPSASB have started the effort to identify key criteria. Like, we need to identify who are the users of the information to create the sustainability reports. There might vary. There might be different people, than in different criterias. We know clearly what we need in the financial report. We are basing our initiative or study with the responses of the users. Second point, if the information is going to be obtained at entity level, state entity level, or country level, it's important to know the scale of information that we need. Third point, the financial restriction on information. You mentioned that. It was mentioned already. There's other elements. You have to analyze what's material, the cost benefits. Another recommendation was to define first the methodology that we're going to implement to create the financial reports for the financial reports of sustainability. We need to know how we're going to visualize the financial reports. Second, we need to analyze the benefits, expected benefits when submitting the financial reports. We need to convince the stakeholders that have an interest so they can buy into the idea. It's very important. So we can compile correctly the information that's contained in the reports. This is a hard effort from IPSASB. Who's going to be the user of the information? We have to measure the level of acceptance of the guiding instrument by the users. Now, in correlation to the development of international norms, recommendations, and so on. We spoke about this. We discussed how to implement the law with NIIFSI and NIIFS2. Those are the norms that are examples. So we need to improve the laws based on the existing law. But amending the law leads us to understand that it's clear that when we change a law in perspective, there's a change in terminology. In other words, not only must we modify the terminology or specific jargon or word that gives us specific values, in our entities. That's something to consider with drafting laws. The norms should lead us to use the matrix of data that we have as a priority so we can contrast the information about the reporting economies. They report their activities. In the implementation phase, we know that the sustainability norms, we know that these norms are correlated to fields of improvement. If we adopt a norm in correlation to the creation of sustainability reports, we must limit and understand the direction or how laws are correlated. We're adopting and implementing laws directly and indirectly. But due to the fact that while we've obtained specific data of climate change and sustainability, we need to adopt directly these norms to compare what's happening between economies. That was part of what we discussed during the panels and interviews. We have to constitute technical committees to make sure that the quality of the information is respected, because that's going to live in the reports. We're going to analyze the different types of data that we obtain to go through the proper decision-making process. Third point, we need to train our people and invite all the stakeholders so we can share the information that we've received in which we explain the climate change conditions so the stakeholders can see exactly what's contained in the climate change and sustainability reports. We need to have clarity. We need to know what we gave to our economies before to continue drafting this report. Second, we're going to kick off a sequence of interviews with IPSASB and other stakeholders to draft the law. Now, based on different grounds, we're going to draft that based on what we've received. And there's going to be another process that we're going to continue developing in 2-3 weeks. We're going to have the initial version of the document. We're going to send it to the member states so you can give us your feedback, comments regarding the instrument. That's going to happen next week. All the countries involved will have a week to review the reports, and we expect your comments. At the end, we will finalize the study. We're going to need a couple of extra weeks to finish off our project, and it's realistic for us to think that we're going to get the final reports, the final results in no more than 4 weeks. This is the data, the content data. You see both pictures. You have my contact information. If you have any feedback, if you want to criticize something, please, we're there. I acknowledge my colleague, Dr. Camira. She's in charge of working in so many efforts, so many initiatives. Ms. Camira deserves that acknowledgement. Thank you so much. No se escucha el video. No tiene audio. Ok. Y me ha costado trabajo interpretar. Preferiría interpretar del audio original, como de cero. ¿Eh? No, me refiero al audio original de origen. O sea, la ponencia en inglés. O sea, para tener una interpretación como de cero. ¿No se puede? Sí, ok, bueno. Well, thank you so much. Once again, we thank the 14 members that participated in this study. It was a major challenge for all of us because we kicked off the project at the end of August. The countries had a little bit of time to respond to the answers. The accountants didn't obtain all the information. They have to coordinate their activities with other entities and agencies. We thank all the support for the participating countries in correlation to the question regarding public debt. It's very specific. And precisely now we're in the preliminary stages of the study. Is a top-level study. We need to work with the available information and know exactly what to do in the future so we can work with IPSASB jointly, so we can give them the assets or elements to define future international sustainable norms for the public sector. If IPSASB rules in December that they're going to follow that path. Obviously, the stakeholders have worried. We know that if we demand much more data to be revealed, we're going to be overloaded with information. We have to be very careful when designing and defining what type of information is necessary. It shouldn't be duplicated. It's clear to us that many stakeholders that work in the public sector have been working in submitting sustainability reports, environmental ministries, resource ministries. We want to achieve the ODS, the SDGs. We don't need to burden ourselves with so much information, but we're working on this. Thank you so much, Camila. There's a direct question. There's a question for Thomas, but I'll also ask this question to Camila and Thomas. What could we do as a regional network to standardize the way in which we produce financial reports that we can compare in correlation to the Millennium Goals? Oh, well, no, I'll say that once again in English. Okay. The question was sent in English and I read it in English, but what should we do as a regional network? What should it do to regulate the way in which we work to produce information that we can compare and correlate to the Millennium Goals, or ODGs? Now, before anything, I'd like to say that it's a benefit for us to have this global network. Many countries don't have a network of this size or dimension. Not only do we generate financial reports, fiscal reports, it's the kickoff stages of what we're doing. We're creating reports of different sectors or natures. It benefits us all. What can we do? We could be part of the sessions of roundtables. We had 8 meetings, share experiences. You can see these in many countries. There's many stakeholders that are working in the development in each economy. We're all aligned. We have to share our experiences in correlation to themes of methodology, developments, protocols, metrologies, and those are guiding instruments that could lead us to compare information in our development. We speak about the participation of IT and intelligence. We need to develop or create, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to find digital solutions in computer science. Let's work jointly to continue developing the common platforms which are regional. Being it so, the results are of great value because of your effort. Okay, next question. The SDGs are not exclusively correlated to accounting. Many stakeholders participate, not only the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Infrastructure Planning. How would IPSASB finally be involved directly in it? I think that you've heard the full question, right? The complete question. Did you hear the complete question? But, at country level, when we, in our presentation, we divided the presentation. We know who the responsible parties are. There's SDGs and climate change. In those columns, we contrasted the differences country by country. When we speak of SDGs, there's commission constituted that work amongst many institutions. We constitute that. There's other government agencies or the chancellors or the executive branch that's involved, to see what's happening in climate change. The top authority mentioned when tackling issues of climate are the Ministry of Environment. There's many government agencies or bodies in charge of this development. It's going to be a challenge for IPSASB too. During December, there's going to be a ruling from IPSASB because IPSASB will be leading the drafting of reporting for the public sector. We need to coordinate our efforts, have roundtables of debate, so we can have one line of investigation well defined with all the stakeholders involved. Now it's Camila who answered the question to my answer. Now I want to also contribute and answer the question of the doctor here. Now that was part of what we discussed with the recommendation instrument that's sent by IPSASB. That's part of the challenges as of now. I think that we have the right understanding with perspective. We know who we're communicating with. We know who the counterpart is. We know who are the interested parties, the stakeholders, and who we need to communicate to, who are the users. We understand the needs of the users. That's first part. IPSASB and its committee should study if they would decide to follow these initiatives with a network. They need to define the network, the community that matters, what's relevant. That's new criteria that gives us different perspectives. We're working with different stakeholders, with parties. We generate content and information in our reports. We're using the generated information. That's definitely part of the challenges that IPSASB is facing. We're going to improve our network without doubt. That's positive, definitely. Okay, so I know that the study is going to be very solid with these type of questions. Are so good. I believe that it's going to be our last question. Right now, somebody's telling me that it's the last question on this side. Based on your experience on the study, do you think that you should create reports at country level or public entity level? What's easier to implement? If I would have an answer when you ask me what's easier to implement, I think that we would all be a step ahead. But in correlation to what's useful, I think and I consider that if we speak about what's useful for the planning of our nations to achieve the SDGs as nations, the value of information, the value depends on what's happening in each economy, in each level, in each layer. I think every entity, every layer has to contribute for us to achieve it. But what's really interesting for me is to see the achievements of each economy to finally meet the SDGs in comparison with what they've planned at nation level. We need to consolidate. We need to create financial reports. And it's part of the effort. It's part of what we're doing. It's extremely important for us to analyze everything from all levels, top levels, so we can achieve the Millennium Goals, so we can compare the objectives with our national plans. After having said this, I think we finished. Thank you so much for your questions. Thank you for being part. Thank you for contributing. We thank the panel members. We're going to continue discussing these matters. Now, we'll continue listening to the president of FOCAL, who will give a token of our acknowledgement and accreditation to the panel members for having participated in the 8th Forum.